Today we get to ride the Talaria MX5, and this bike has had some huge improvements over the MX4, so we're going to get into what those improvements are, and then I'm going to do a couple of things to the bike to make it a little bit better for riding on the trail. So let's get into it. Talaria has made some huge improvements on this bike. In fact, it is almost redesigned from the ground up. The frame looks very similar to what it used to, but underneath all of that, it's got a lot of improvements. It's got a way larger battery. It's a 72 volt, 40 amp hour battery with a power output of 13.5 kilowatts at 500 Newton meters of torque. I'm really excited to actually try that and see how that feels. But the good thing is they can put that power to the ground now with this new gearbox that they put on the bike. It is a lot stronger. They reinforced the gearbox. They actually reinforced the mounts for it as well, which was an issue in the previous MX4 and MX3 renditions. And they also moved over to a 428 chain. This is one of the first small size bikes that has moved over to a chain that size, which is really nice because the 420 chains used to stretch a ton. So you were going through chains constantly trying to make it happen. They also put a 48.2 sprocket on here and a chain guide. These bikes are known for tossing their chains. That chain guide is going to be a huge improvement to stopping that from happening. So another really cool feature about this bike is they've completely redesigned the wheel set. So it's actually got a lot thicker gauge spokes with straight pull hubs. The only bummer is MX4 and MX3 wheels do not fit on this bike. So the aftermarket world needs to catch up to that in order to give you better options like 1619 or 1821 wheels. And then a couple other basics are the brakes. These brakes are actually dot fluid and they're way larger. They're a lot more like an MX style brake, which is huge. Even the levers feel amazing in comparison to what they did. I have yet to feel the stopping power of them, so that's something that we're going to talk about when I actually get into riding it. But they've made a ton of improvements on this bike. All the way down to the foot pegs, they've got an actual thumb regen lever. They've got a different colored display on this, a light switch, different suspension from what they previously had. Looking at this suspension, I actually don't know what it is, but it looks a lot like the RST fork that comes on the E-Ride Pro. I'm interested to see what fork that actually is. I don't know that they're going to release that information, but more than anything, I think what's important is how it feels while we ride. So we'll get into that when we actually start riding the bike. These smaller bikes are also pretty known for having a really flexy swing arm. They've gone and they have redesigned and strengthened the swing arm on this. So hopefully it doesn't flex nearly as much and you got a much more solid feel to the ground on the bike. So I'm interested to try that as well. But before I actually get into riding this machine, there's a couple of improvements that I want to make on it that are going to cost me all of $10 to do. So let's get into it. So before I take this to the trail, the first thing that I'm going to do is actually remove all of the sensors on this bike. All of these small sized e-motos come with 3 different sensors. They've got brake sensors, they've got a tilt sensor, and they have a kickstand sensor. I'm assuming this bike is no different, so I'm going to get into those and show you guys how to remove them. I don't like these sensors because oftentimes they can lead to issues when you're riding aggressively, and I plan on taking this to a pretty awesome trail. So I don't want those sensors to get in the way of how I'm riding. So we'll go through and remove those. And then the only other thing I'm going to do to this bike before we take it to a trail is replace these grips. I like thin grips a lot. I hate these grips. They're really, really fat and they don't feel very good on your hands. So I'm going to replace those. That's a preference thing, but it costs like $10 to do. So that's all I'm going to do to the bike, then we'll take it to the trails. All right, so to get into removing the brake sensors, there's actually a Phillips head screw underneath the lever here. And you're going to take and undo that, and the whole sensor will pop off of the bike itself. So there's your sensor. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to chase this sensor all the way back to its main wiring harness. You can actually unplug it from right here. So now that I've unplugged this, I'm going to take this plug here, I'm going to cover it with heat shrink, and then I'm going to put it back into the frame of the bike so it's just out of my way and this sensor is no longer active. Then you just repeat that on the other side. So to tuck these sensors back into the bike, I need to chase it back down underneath this key. So with a 3mm Allen, I'm going to undo these and remove this key port. Then we'll go ahead and clip these zip ties, kind of holding everything together. Then you can pull that sensor, and once I heat shrink this, I'm going to just tuck it right back underneath this key port and put the key back over. This bike also has a speed limiter on it at the moment. So to access that, I need to remove the front fender. And then there's a little plate here that's covering the horn. I need to pull that off as well. And then I can cut the limiter and unlock this bike to its truest potential. So to remove the front fender, it is 4mm Allen. There's 3 screws here. So I got the fender off. Now I just got to remove this plate here. These are all 3mm Allens, and there's 3 of them. Now that's off the bike, I can actually pull this plate off. And then I gotta fish out. So you pull this out, and then you'll find this brown looped wire here. All you gotta do to unlock the bike is snip this wire. Now this bike is unlocked and good to go. I'm gonna tuck it back over this, make sure those ends do not touch each other. And then electrical tape around that just to kind of secure things. So right under here where you just remove this to unlock the bike is also the tilt sensor. So you can take and follow this wire down and unplug the tilt sensor here. That's all you got to do. And then I would also suggest reheat shrinking over this as well. Now to actually remove the tilt sensor, I had to pull the battery out, and then I'm also going to get this battery tray to move. So there's 2 4mm bolts on the side here. If you undo those, once you take those out of the sides, you can pull this back. That kind of opens up access to get to this tilt sensor that you just unplugged. You can just pull that straight up. All right, now that it's been mutilated and all your sensors are out, we can just kind of tuck things back into place and somehow put this bike back together. Last thing to remove is this kickstand sensor here. In order to actually remove this, I gotta pull the skid plate off the bike. To do that, it is 4mm Allens, and there's 4 of them. 2 on each side, a little bit tight, a lot of bit tight. All right, so you're gonna chase that wire for the kickstand to this loom here, and it is this plug right here. So just go ahead and unplug that. And then there's a couple of zip ties here, so I'm gonna clip those zip ties underneath. Then you can pull that sensor down and through. Now I just got to remove it with a 12mm wrench right here. Then you just untwist it from here. Then you can just put the skid plate back on the bike after. All right, last thing I'm gonna do is just replace these grips. Like I said, not a fan of these grips. I'm a really big fan of a half waffle grip, either ODI or Renthal. They're amazing grips. So you just gotta take off the end cap, which is 4mm Allen, and then, because I really don't like these grips, I'm just gonna cut them right off. Probably don't need to do a whole install video on how to do grips, but I usually recommend using like an air compressor or something like that to help you get the grip on. A lot of people have a lot of different methods to doing grips. You can use grip glue, you can use wire ties, sometimes you can use both. If I'm doing like a 30-minute moto, chances are I'll actually do both, but for something like this, I think just using an air compressor and letting the rubber grab the bar is all you really need on a bike like this. So, first ride on the Talaria. Let's turn it on. I charged it up so we're at 100% battery, and I'm going to record this ride and see exactly where I end up. I'm going to put the regen down to 1, but I'm going to put the power up to hyper, because why not? Let's go big or go home. Let's get after it. Let's see how this goes. It's going to be an actually proper trail, so I'm interested to see how the bike does. I'm really hoping I don't get a flat tire, but see how quick it is. That thing moves. It's pretty fast. I'm in hyper mode right now. Gone 1 mile to get to the trailhead here. That 1 mile, I'm at 95% battery, but that was going decently quick on a fire road. This is a really gnarly trail to ride, so it's going to be pretty proper. I hope I don't pinch flat. We're really going to test how strong the carcass of these tires are, but yeah, you ready for this, man?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
The reason I hope I don't pinch flat is because there's so many rocks that are pretty sharp on this trail. I'm going to be riding in hyper mode the entire time. And the power feels really good, really reliable. You can tell that the bike's quick. This is such a beautiful trail. So right off the bat, the foot pegs feel a little bit forward. Kind of like weirdly so. Just the position of them. I'd almost like them to go backwards an inch. And then the handlebar curve, or the handlebar bend, was quite weird. It's a tough trail, especially with no traction on these really thin tires. I usually ride this trail on like an Ultra B with gummies, so it's gonna really beat me up.
Man, I feel really like weirdly. Oh wow, that's a problem. Okay, so I was wondering why I was feeling kind of like lopsided while riding. Even after tightening these down a lot when I built the bike, they are twisting with ease. So I'm gonna go back to the trailer, even though I'm, oh man, that's actually not good at all. Even though I'm 3 miles into this ride, and get some tools and hope that tightening it again works. But number one upgrade recommendation, do a direct mount stem. Quick little tune up. All right, let's get back to it. All right, so I'm getting back onto the trail again after having to go get some tools, carrying those tools with me this time. Got this tightened up. The suspension is a little bit harsh, so I backed out the compression on it, try to get a better feel for the front end. I like the brakes a lot so far. I really like the feeling of the levers, but the whole bike still kind of feels a little bit forward. So as I get more used to it, we'll see how much better it starts to feel. But right now, the bike has got major improvements over the MX4. So far, so good.
A couple of things I want to talk about that I'm feeling so far. First off is the power. The power is really good, actually. That 13.5 kilowatts, there when you want it to be, but it's actually really smooth to get there. Like, I'm riding in hyper mode on a really slow and technical rocky trail right now, and super controllable. Honestly, I probably shouldn't be in hyper mode. I'd probably have even more control in sport, but I just want to see how it does. You know, you want to ride the bike to its potential. But when it comes to handling, this bike is a lot comfier to sit down on than it is to stand. So a little bit of the problem I'm having is I'm pretty crouched over on this bike, and the problem is I'm only 5'8", so to be crouched over on this bike is a little bit rough. So I definitely need to make some improvements to try to fix that. And then trying to get this rear tire to hook up. I know GoPro isn't going to do this justice, but this is actually really steep. I've been climbing a lot, and I'll show you the data of the ride that I do after I get done. But this is a pretty steep trail. I'm trying to keep traction over really loose and rocky terrain is a little bit tricky, but you know, I'm a really big fan of 1619 or even 1821 wheels on these bikes. And see, it's hard to get traction right now to go up this. I'm actually trying to put all my weight down. This is really steep. Let's go. Like I said, I'm a really big fan of 1619 wheels, and the tire options that those provide So hopefully the aftermarket world picks up really quickly on these bikes and gives you great wheel set options. And I'm sure it will. This isn't the only bike that's going to be running these this style of wheel set and brakes soon. So it's kind of the next thing that the aftermarket world needs to get done. This trail is so beautiful. But it doesn't get ridden very often because it's a really technical trail, so I'm definitely bushwhacking and wishing I had some hand guards because a lot of these trees keep grabbing my fingers and the brakes. But I will say I can already tell that this bike is a way better trail bike than it would be a track bike. It's going to do a lot better in situations out here just because of the stance of the geometry. It's not nearly as aggressive as other bikes like the Sur-On or the E-Ride or Ventus. So out here is where it actually shines. So if you're somebody that likes jumping a lot, this might not be the bike for you. But I'm taking a completely stock bike on a really difficult trail. I'm making it through it. I'm a little bit surprised I'm making it through it because this is a tough trail on an Ultra B with moose tubes on gummy tires. So I'm getting worked a little bit, but I'm also having a lot of fun out here trying to. The bike's got plenty of power to do this though. It's just a matter of keeping traction. But it's nice that a bike with really good power has really good brakes. I'm a really big fan of these brakes so far. They're working really well. The actual levers are really nice. Come on. Come on, bike, dig. Dig. Let's go, let's go, let's go. This isn't even the really hard part. Oh my gosh. This is actually frustrating. This shouldn't be that tough. Oh, come on. Safe to say I would not compete in Red Bull TKO on this bike. I don't know how bad I want to put you guys through this struggle with me, but I can't get any traction on this bike. Let's take it down to eco mode. Doesn't make it any easier. That's just how bad this rear tire is. Putting all my weight on the rear tire to just try to give it some glimmer of hope. I haven't even made it up halfway on this thing. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to make it to the top of this mountain because this part is so difficult on this bike. I'm not gonna have a tire by the end of this. Come on. Wow, this is tough. Hopefully I can get even somewhat of a run into this. I really doubt it, but let's go full commitment mode. Come on, bike. Yes. Oh, come on. Keep going. Yes. Wow, that sucked. 60 degrees out and I'm sweating. Also, after that hill, I'm at 39% battery. So steep, so brutal. But it can climb a hill really well. Jeez. I don't know how well you guys can tell, but this view is absolutely insane. So I've gone 13 miles, which is not a lot, but it's been primarily uphill and up a really steep hill. I'm at 34% battery so far. So this is a really, I'm not making this into an official range test or anything, but this is just kind of the real world. This is my riding, and I'm at 34% so far. I'm gonna head back down to the bottom of the mountain, and I'll give you guys an update when I make it down there. So this bike is pretty rattly, and all of that rattling is coming from the chain guide. Luckily it's not like the battery like the MX4 was. But, I mean, that's kind of the price you pay to have a good chain guide on a bike. I think chain guides are really important, and I wish a lot more of these bikes did them. Alright, now that I'm going downhill so much, I'm going to try to click up some regen. So I'm going to put it into 2, and I'm going to see how much more effective that is. And I can already tell right off the bat 2 is actually making a huge difference. This is crazy. Let's kick the regen all the way up to 4. Oh, this bike doesn't even want to move. Steep and loose, man. Oh, that regen is really strong in 4. I'm off the brakes completely right now, and this is all regen. That's crazy. I actually don't know how I feel about it, because if I barely touch the throttle, all of that regen releases, and then the bike just starts going way fast like that right there. So 4 is too much regen. Let's go back down to 2. And I'll actually try this regen thumb as well. I don't like the position that it's in. It's gonna be weird to use. So let's try the regen thumb. It doesn't do anything, in case you guys are wondering. That legitimately didn't do anything. I'm gonna turn the regen off, try this thumb again, see if it actually does something. Let's try the thumb. Okay, so if your regen is off, or down to 1, you can actually feel the thumb do something. But that thing feels pretty gimmicky in comparison to aftermarket controllers. I don't like that. This bike's a lot more controllable when you don't have the regen on, you just use the brakes. Luckily the brakes are really strong, so that makes it work well. This, guys, is what I was climbing earlier that I was struggling a lot on. Hopefully the GoPro is starting to do it a little bit more justice. But it is gnarly. Holy sketch balls. Wow. Crazy. All right, just got done with a pretty brutal trail ride. This is a really tough trail. It's even difficult on an Ultra B with moose tubes and gummies. It's a lot easier on a bike like that than it is a bike like this though.
You probably saw I did not have a lot of traction on one of those parts, which was really frustrating trying to climb up. But that comes down to the stock wheels and tires. Hopefully very soon we'll get a lot of options for 1619 wheels that we can get way better tire options for. In the meantime, you're kind of stuck with this. You can do a better tire like a Tusk ground wire or something like that in the back to give you a little bit more traction. But I went, let's see, according to the bike itself, it says I went 18 miles. According to my actual GPS, I went 16 miles. So that 2 mile difference that you're seeing is this bike doing a burnout trying to climb up that mountain. But I am at 30% battery, which is really good. When I got to the top of the mountain, I was at 34%. So to come all the way back down, which was another 8 miles, only losing 4%. So I climbed 5,800 feet in elevation. This whole ride took me a total of 2 hours. I had a few issues along the way, like this not direct mount stem. That was a major issue. Definitely recommend getting an actual direct mount stem on this bike. But for the MX5 and the improvements over the MX4 itself, this bike is significantly better. The brakes were way better. The regen on this bike is really strong. It's so strong I didn't actually like it, but the regen thumb switch here is a little bit of a gimmick. It's in a really bad position. You could try to move it to the other side of the bars, but then you're kind of clustering up the left side as well. But it really doesn't work that well in the first place. So I would just stick to the actual regen settings that this bike has, which do work really well. But beyond that point, the power of the bike feels awesome. The suspension is extremely supportive. It was actually kind of harsh in comparison to previous models, but yeah, the bike did really good. It did get progressively louder as the ride went on and the chain kind of stretched into a more natural resting position, but that comes down to the chain guide itself. That's really the only noises that I heard on the bike, which in comparison to the MX4, that bike was loud and clunky all over the place. So this bike is definitely quieted down quite a bit. And if you remove that chain guide, it's gonna quiet down more, but I really would not suggest doing that. I would keep that chain guide on the bike. It helps out keeping that chain in place. But yeah, so far the MX5 has impressed me a lot in comparison to the MX3 and the MX4.